I just wish more people were willing to have the temporarily uncomfortable conversations that would lead to a lifetime of better sex, more pleasure, more aliveness, more intimacy in their relationship. The lower libido person, if they are not connected to their own sensuality and erotic needs and erotic satisfaction, they're also missing out.
Welcome to the Vibrant Couple. I have invited Michelle Martinez today, who is a sacred intimacy coach who specializes in helping couples with mismatched libidos. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm assuming that you and I share a vision of happy couples who have a healthy and satisfying sex life.
Yeah, absolutely. Just based on what we've talked about already, a little bit, I think we share a lot in common in that way.
Wonderful. And so before we talked about that vision and solutions, how about we talked about the tragedy of sex problems in couples? What do you see with the couples you work with?
I'll actually answer this question by referencing a video that I posted, I think it was back in end of February, early March probably, where I had given myself a personal challenge to initiate sex with my husband for 28 days. So it was a 4-week kind of challenge. And the reason that I did that is because he had brought to my attention that I was not initiating sex much at all, right? I was open when he did, but I wasn't doing it proactively in my own self. And we had to talk about it. And I realized, yeah, you're right. Like, that's not fair, right? Like it's not fair for this to be kind of one way in that regard. And to me, being able to initiate every single day meant that I would need to connect with what I needed in order to be in the mood, in order to feel open to that, so it was an opportunity for me to not only meet his needs, but also get to know myself a lot better in this respect. And so I'm just mentioning that because when I posted that video, it got so much more traction than I ever thought it would. And the comment section ended up filled with people, mostly men, talking about how they were in these sexless relationships and how hurt they were and how lonely it felt, and just the years, like I couldn't believe, like 20 years, 30 years, 25 years of relationships that, maybe it didn't mean sexless in the sense of like we haven't had sex in 20 years literally, but definitely undersexed, right? And I just started to, I don't know, it started to click in a different way for me that not only is this impacting, a higher libido partner who often ends up, who's often a man, but also the lower libido partner, because especially if this is, it's easy, I guess, to assume that it's like higher libido person is a man and the lower libido person is a woman, and that does tend to be the dynamic sometimes, but definitely not all the time. But in any case, the lower libido person, if they are not connected to their own sensuality and erotic needs and erotic satisfaction, they're also missing out, So to me, then the question became, okay, like what is going on for all of these guys, like wives, right? Like what's going on with her that she's lost interest, given up, has some kind of block, has just, because it's one thing to not want sex for some temporary or circumstantial reason, right? Like we're having a fight or hormones, or I just gave birth, or, something like this. And it's another to have it become a prolonged pattern where you don't even want to want sex anymore, and like, that's where I feel like people get lost, is when you give up on even wanting to want it. Whereas people that like, for example, with me, right? Like if I find myself not wanting it, I still want to want it. So I figure out what the block is. I want to address whatever the issue is because I value sex that much, right? Like I value getting back to that good, connected, sensual, intimate space with my husband. And so that's always going to be the underlying, like that motivation's always going to be there. And so for me, it's a matter of helping both people find that yes and that willingness to work on whatever is blocking them from getting to that yes.
I love that, to find that yes, because sexuality is not something we learn in school, not something that is spontaneous, that's something we have to learn. And there is terrible education on porn, on basically what not to do.
Yeah.
And but this is somehow the model, and Hollywood is not porn, but somehow you see couples only in the honeymoon phase when they rip each other's clothes. That's not normal sex for most couples, after a number of years of marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also see, like, in sitcoms, at least back in like the 90s, early, aughts and whatnot, I don't know, the comedy couples, where they're just always fighting, so it's like you've got the hot and heavy Hollywood kind of scenario, and then you've got the like long-term married couple where they're kind of joking about never, she never wants it, or he's hasn't been laid in so long, and that kind of dynamic. And we're really lacking the kind of role model of the 30-year married people who are still playful and flirtatious and enjoy each other's bodies. And
it seemed that you and your husband were talking about sex, which many couples don't, and you also listen to his feedback, his requests, his needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first, how do you get couples to talk about sex after 10, 20, 30, 70 years?
I mean, they have to be willing, right? Like usually someone submits an application or, a request for a call with me. So they're on some level, they're already ready. They're already open to talking. Otherwise I can't insert myself into a relationship where neither person is open. But what I find helpful for folks that, want to have those conversations, but haven't been able to do it just with each other. So they're looking for some help, right? What I find really useful in those scenarios is to just give them some new language to talk about what they're experiencing. So I spend a lot of time reading a lot of books about sexuality. And so I have a lot of frameworks that I can share with them to talk about what they're experiencing. And once they have the words, then they can start communicating a bit better. So for example, the erotic blueprints that Jaya came up with, right? Those are new to a lot of people. The idea that your sexuality can be based on energy instead of genital stimulation or being turned on by porn or being very focused on intercourse all the time, right? That you could have turn on from just the anticipation of touch instead of touch, that you could have energy orgasms, and that would be really fun and fulfilling for you, that that your sexuality is could be that you'd be more turned on by something that's taboo, right? Or kinky. Like I think just opening up these possibilities for people to explain what turns them on and why can be really validating. And Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski is also another amazing resource because, she provides the frameworks of like sexual breaks and accelerators. So we think that to get our partner turned on, we need to seduce them, touch them, all these things. But those are all accelerators. And if they've got a sexual break, pushed down, the vehicle's not going to go anywhere, right? Like you have to make sure that the stressors are lifted, that a person's open to touch, open to intimacy before you'll be able to seduce them, right? Before these other kinds of strategies are gonna even work. And then she talks about spontaneous and responsive desire, which is also so helpful for so many people. And so I think that is a game changer for a lot of couples, is just having these validating, frameworks and language they can use to describe what's going on for them. Because otherwise you're just in a situation where the default assumed kind of sexual experience is like, you touch my boobs or his cock or whatever, and I'm supposed to get turned on, and that's supposed to do it enough, and it's supposed to be spontaneous, and if it's not those things, then something's wrong with me. It's my hormones or my sexual conditioning or whatever, and those things might play a role. But being able to validate these different types of sexual wiring that people have, and that just all of these different preferences that are equally legitimate, helps so much. So people don't feel so broken, and they can just start to, play with what actually works for one another.
In addition, these days we have the nice guy syndrome after the Me Too movement, where too many men are so afraid of leading to sex, asking for sex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think women make it, some women, right, make it difficult because on the one hand, they absolutely want to be respected, and on the other hand, I've heard guys say that they will ask to kiss somebody and she'll immediately be turned off by the fact that he had to ask, right? Or it's like being punished for being for getting the consent first, and that they want someone who's just going to take them instead, but that puts him in such a awkward and vulnerable position if he doesn't know she wants it, and he's just trying to do the right thing. And so there's these kind of, I don't know if it's a double standard exactly, but it's mixed messages for sure.
I don't think it's a double standards, because in one way it is very important that men be respectful and civil in daily life. And on the other hand, it's really important that men understand that women want their men to lead them and take them, of course, with full consent. And for most men, it is not possible to be both unless they do a lot of work on themselves and, get rid of all these nice guy breaks that are in the way.
And to get good at reading body language, and, I think there's a certain emotional intelligence a person has to cultivate to get good at that. So just showing each other some grace as we learn, right? Like how to do this well with each other. And of course, I think the dynamics are different when you're just dating someone versus being in a long-term relationship. But yeah, I agree with you. That's, it's learning to be the both and is so sexy, right? Like it's,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I love this word grace, because in a nutshell, a marriage for me is a place to learn and grow together. And, all these things that we cannot learn from porn, from Hollywood, or from sitcoms. And in all of these things that we tend to blame each other when our needs are not met.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume, and I want to make sure that it's very clear that low libido is not a woman problem, but let's take the case of a man with high libido who wants more sex than his wife, and his wife having more of a responsive desire. So please talk about that, what it is, and how do you invite the couples you work with that have that makeup to learn to use that responsive desire nature well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for anyone listening that's not familiar with what responsive and spontaneous desire means, I'll just clarify that real quick. Someone with responsive, well, I'll start with spontaneous, sorry. Someone with spontaneous desire is someone who will want sex mentally, like they'll start thinking about sex and wanting sex mentally before they're ever touched, before they have like the physiological arousal. They'll be mentally aroused. And I think this tends to also happen with people that have a, like hormonally, sex drive kind of comes up like a hunger. Like if it hasn't happened in a while, it might just like arise every a little bit every day or something like that. So it's a more consistent presence in their lives. Whereas someone with responsive desire is less likely to just kind of want sex in this way that feels out of the blue. And they get more turned on and more aroused once they're already being touched. Like they need their body to become aroused before they're going to mentally want sex. So before they start to think of like, now I want sex, I'm ready for sex, their bodies already need to be engaged. I sometimes also think about responsive desire as like people that's like, I need a reason to feel turned on, right? Like I need to be responding to something that is sexy. And that a lot of the time that's being touched in a way that feels relaxing or sensual. And that helps to open the body and help them feel more, desire for sex. So when there's a couple that, the lower libido person or seemingly lower libido, someone with responsive desire, is with someone with a higher libido or spontaneous desire, something that is often helpful for them is to provide a transition time for the responsive desire person to get out of their head and into their body, because being in their body provides that space for arousal. So, for example, it can often be really helpful to give a responsive desire person a back rub or massage, or for them to even just take a little break if they're a bath person, to take a short bath, but to do something that engages their senses and helps them drop into their body a bit more. Then they become usually much more open to sexual intimacy. But before that, it's like they're in their head, they're go, go, go. Sex is the last thing on their mind. And it's not because they aren't attracted to their partner or don't want to have an active, great sex life. It's almost like it's just not on their radar. So to get it on their radar and to bring them back into their body, back into that moment, open to intimacy, there just needs to be some kind of transition ritual,
One of the things that I do with the couples I work with when there is that mismatched libido with a man having more libido, is I tell the man that it is really important that they consider that there is before play and foreplay, because men associate with foreplay with genital touch. So really important to have something in which there is no genital touch yet, in which they do not somehow put a brake on themselves. They are fully present, fully with their desire, because I believe that desire turns their woman on, but take it very slowly for her to warm up.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I would agree with that.
In your 28 days, I'm assuming that you have a responsive desire, or more responsive. What did you learn on how to learn by yourself, for yourself, so that you can show up to your couple as a more skilled and more present and more ready person? Of course, he still has to do the before play and the foreplay. But what did you learn that you believe would be helpful to the people listening to our conversation?
Yeah. So, and this was something that I was aware of before, but I hadn't embodied it or implemented it the same way that I learned to do it during this challenge for myself. But so if you think of masculine sexual energy as being more fiery and women's sexual energy as being more like water, it's like masculine sexual energy is quick to ignite and also quick to extinguish. And feminine sexual energy is slower to boil, but then stays hot longer. So for me, I use this kind of metaphor where it's like, if I'm going to be consistently open to sex, and also if I just want to feel more in touch with my eroticism throughout the day, what I need to be doing is having a daily practice of some kind where I'm simmering, like where I'm keeping my water at a simmer, right? So it doesn't take as much energy. It's not like every time we're taking a cold pot of water and like trying to get it up to temp, right? Like I'm engaging with my body. I'm doing some kind of practice to keep my own sexual energy, let's stay aware of it, keep it flowing. And so during this challenge, several times I would, I'd notice like, okay, like I'm actually, pot of cold water basically. And I need to do something to bring up, my sexual energy, my own temp. And for me, those are practices like using the jade egg, yoni egg, using a crystal wand for like de-armoring, sometimes like giving myself a breast massage, dancing, maybe even just like singing to get into my body, but like some breath work sometimes, but doing something to get that energy flowing and to feel more in touch with my own body. And then usually I'm ready, right away. Then it's like, all right, come on in. Like I'm ready to go. But it does take that being proactive, right? And it also is a time, I think it's really effective for me because it's a time that there's no performance pressure and I can be very spacious with the time that I give myself to warm up and get to that place. And like you said, it's not a replacement for before play and foreplay, right? Still want that. But it's at least, not to, hammer this metaphor in too much, but to turn up the temperature for myself and to stay at that like low simmer.
And that seems like a wonderful remedy for PD sex because PD sex is a turn off for both.
Yeah.
And so how can a woman that is learning or has learned to create the simmer, because I'm assuming it did not come overnight. This is something you had to practice and practice and practice more. How can a woman invite her partner to play with her in that pre-play? So can they text each other? And men somehow need technique. So would there be a one or two text messages, content you could give men that would invite them to play? Because I'm assuming that those days where the two of them are playing, even if they're not together in the same room or the same house, all that turns both on and makes both much more ready to be with each other.
Yeah. So are you talking about like if a woman is, we'll just call it simmering, like as a practice, or when she's not, like just when they're apart from each other, how can they keep that like eroticism alive between them?
Yeah. Yeah. So for example, a man could text his woman and say, I cannot wait to undress you tonight. And, women love to be desired.
Yeah.
And so what could a woman somehow text her partner to invite him to play, or for him to know, or for him to know that she's working on her juiciness?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, sure, something like, I really miss your body. Like next time, like when you come home, what are you going to do to me? Or, I miss the feeling of, your hands all over me. I love the way that you, like, sincere compliments, I think, about what they enjoy during sex with them, right? Like I love the way that you grab my ass when we're having sex. I love the way that you stroke my hair. I'd love to, like, next time you're here, I'd love to like just gaze into your eyes for a few minutes before, like, while you're inside me, or anything, like just like what it is that you want sincerely.
I find it very interesting that I had to prompt you several times, and now you're going, you cannot stop.
Yeah, it's so many. I think I wanted to know. Yeah, I wanted to confirm you were asking what I thought you were asking.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so those are some ideas, right? And I suppose, like, I'm trying to think of, for folks that have different kinds of blueprints also, those were all quite sexual. And yeah, I would have to think more, I guess, about is, working with some of the other blueprints, like kinky would, it could be other types of like kinky requests and things, right? Like, um,
Could the sensual be, I cannot wait for you to light
mm,
candles tonight? Something like that?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, or
Okay.
even like a request like, oh my God, if I, it would turn me on so much if I came home and you had the bedroom lit up with candles, or um, can can you light that scented candle that has that scent, that I love so much, that would turn me on, or lay out that blanket, I'm gonna do XYZ to you on that blanket, working in those different senses into the requests. I think being asked specific things to do to turn each other on is in itself a huge turn on.
So, Michelle, we talked earlier about brakes and accelerators. So far, we've talked more about accelerators and the juiciness that we can expect and can have during sex. Please talk more about brakes and what you do with your clients to address those brakes that are real for many couples.
Yeah, the number one break that I see in couples that I work with is a sense of contempt or resentment. That is what gets in the way of being open to turn on and desire in a relationship most of the time. So when we talk about resentment and contempt, this shows up because someone feels disrespected by their partner. Maybe they made a comment at a dinner party in front of other people that was condescending, something like that. Maybe this happens, in just between the two of them over and over again, where they feel like they're being treated like a little kid and not trusted. This could show up like not feeling very seen even during sex. Like if you feel like your body's just being used and your partner's not tuned into you, and you're not, your experience isn't being considered, that kind of thing. It can show up with a very imbalanced division of labor in the house. If one partner feels like they're doing way more than the other person, and they're constantly having to be the like manager of the household, right? Like they're in charge of everything unless they delegate it to the other person. So there's all of these different things that can create a sense of resentment or contempt for the other person. And that's going to be a huge block. Like that's going to really put the brakes on any kind of openness for intimacy.
What advice would you have for women and for men to basically develop mind-blowing sex in their couple wherever they are starting from? Could be from no sex, could be sex once in a while, could be sex that is already good, could be sex that is already great. But how can you get even better sex?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important steps to take toward amazing sex with your partner is to have a conversation about what you want sex to be in your relationship. Like, how do you want sex to feel? And how does that compare to how it feels now, right? Because someone might say, I want sex to feel spiritual. I want sex to feel like it takes me, like it's a shift in consciousness. Like I want to go to a different place, like in my body and in my mind. And that might be super different than, what the other person had in mind. Like, oh, I'm mostly having sex because I'm horny and I need some release, right? Or they might be like, the way that I want to have sex is I want to feel really close to you. Like this is my way of being able to feel my feelings and have tenderness, and I want to share that with you. And you don't have to have matching reasons to have sex, but it's good to identify if you have conflicting reasons for having sex, right? But I think for most couples, they gel together pretty well, and they can even inspire one another. So if someone is wanting sex that is feeling more transcendent, more spiritual, that could be something that maybe the other person hadn't even considered as a possibility, and now they're studying tantra together, right? And conversely, if the other person wants to explore more like taboo, edgy, kinky stuff, and the other person hadn't really considered that, now that can be a world that they discover or explore together as well. And I think for most people, great sex, having like an amazing sex life, actually means being able to have a wide range of sexual experiences together. So the more that both of you are willing to branch out and bring like your genuine turn on to the relationship and communicate about that, the more it's gonna benefit both of you, because you'll be expanding the range and type of experience that you can have sexually. Because to me, sex is best when you think of it as a place where you can bring the full spectrum of who you are. So you have a spiritual side, a kinky side, a really like an energetic woo-woo side, a primal side, right? Like a wild side. Like these are all welcome. It's just a matter of learning how to developing that safety between the two of you to know that whichever side comes out, like whatever the mood is, right, for that sexual encounter that you have together, that the other person can hold it and play with you. Like it can be a yes and you're not going to get shut down or shamed for bringing a certain part of you to that space. So I think where a lot of people get stuck is thinking that it has to look a specific way and they can't bring all of themselves to the bedroom. And then of course it's going to get stagnant when you feel like it's got to fit in this little box of.
Yeah, I'm assuming the yes and you're talking about and mentioned a few times is from improv comedy. Exactly. So basically you learn to be present in the moment and deal with what is. And actually that's what good sex is to just be responsive with each other and turn each other on and play with each other.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's from improv. So you never contradict what someone else is doing, right? But you take it and you run with it and you can change direction. But you're never rejecting what they did. Yeah.
So I'm loving this because a lot of the men I work with have the impression of being contradicted, of being made wrong. And so how do you do that in real life with the couples you work with so that men feel invited, feel supported, feel empowered by their woman to fully show up?
Yeah. So if I'm addressing the partner who is rejecting, like shutting the other person down or rejecting or feeling resistant to like his desires, judging him, shaming him, the first place I would start with them is to ask, like, what is the story that you're telling yourself about what his desire means, right? So, for example, if he wants to experiment with choking or something, right? Like, and she's like, that's gross, or that's so bad, or whatever it might, some judgment about like that means that you want to be violent toward women or violent toward me. We've got to identify what the story is, right? Like, because if there's an underlying story that like he's a bad person for wanting this, then of course there's going to be judgment around that, and of course there's going to be resistance. But what if that's not the story? What if we can change the underlying story around it or the interpretation of it to be more like, this is shadow work. Like putting it in a different kind of frame or light, like we all have a part of ourselves that wants to, do things that are taboo or naughty or whatever. It's like, so what is it for you, other person, right? Like if you're rejecting it in him, you're probably rejecting it in you. So let's talk about if you have a side of this and like hopefully provide a safe space for you to acknowledge this lives in you also, right? And if you had permission to express that part of you, would that feel liberating? Like, how would that feel, right? or are you pretty committed to like stuffing it down? So this is where the sexual and the spiritual to really kind of, come together. Because when we have all these parts of ourselves and we shame them, it's this repression that gets projected onto other people, right? So people that are sexually free don't have sexual judgments about other people. And so that's the dynamic that I try to work with when I have a couple in front of me where someone is experiencing a lot of judgment toward their partner for whatever it is that they desire.
The word that comes to mind right now is curiosity towards each other and towards oneself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. That's it. Curiosity about what it means for that other person, curiosity about what's going on, in you. And, I studied mindfulness. I was a mindfulness researcher for about 10 years. And so the principles of like curiosity, non-judgment, acceptance, all of these are so important in sexuality and coaching. And so the more that I can help couples bring that mentality, that attitude, that mindfulness to their conversations with each other, the better it flows, the more productive those conversations can be.
So be curious, be mindful, be present with each other, learn by yourself, learn together, pay attention to breaks, pay attention to accelerators and juiciness, find different ways of making yourself and your partner juicy. Mm-hmm. Am I missing anything?
I mean, you covered a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm going to put in the description below ways to reach you. And then very shortly, I'm going to also link the video of your 28-day experiment. Is there any last thought you would love to share?
I just wish more people were willing to have the temporarily uncomfortable conversations that would lead to a lifetime of better sex, more pleasure, more aliveness, more intimacy in their relationships. Like, first, it's so easy to just avoid for years, but it just takes a little bit of courage to have some uncomfortable conversations that can make such a difference for the rest of your life.
If this video inspired you to liberate more love and more mind-blowing sex, please hit the like button below and subscribe so you can be notified when I publish new juicy content. And please share with all you believe would benefit. I look forward to seeing you very soon.